So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, Ohio State prospect CJ Stroud officially declared for the NFL draft yesterday after, kind of a little bit of a questionable period, right? Is he going to go? Is he going to stay at Ohio State? What is the situation with the Ohio State quarterback and potential #1 overall pick? Now, CJ Stroud yesterday did inform the media and the NFL that he is officially declaring for the NFL draft. And while at first glance this might not seem like a big deal for the Detroit Lions, this one single move could have astronomical effects on the franchise of the Detroit Lions in more ways than one, even if it doesn't directly involve CJ Stroud going to Detroit. And today we're going to talk about how this affects the Lions, how, one of the top prospects actually entering the draft and not returning to school is a very good thing for Detroit. Looking at the NFL draft, right? It's a long ways away. There's going to be movement up and down boards throughout the entire offseason, and free agency and everything like that is going to affect how most teams are going to attack the NFL draft this season. But at this point, we can pretty confidently say there are a couple top guys, right? Will Anderson of Alabama, Jalen Carter of Georgia, CJ Stroud, now of Ohio State, Bryce Young of Alabama, and of course, Myles Murphy from Clemson. Now, there's a couple other guys that have been talked about as potential top 5, top 3 players, guys like maybe a Will Levis or a Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, but those are really the 5 to 6 big players, if you want to include Will Levis, as far as where the top of the draft is currently sitting and how the top of the draft is currently looking for the Detroit Lions. Now, looking at the teams inside the top 5, the teams that picked before the Detroit Lions, you have Chicago, Houston, Arizona, Indianapolis, as well as Seattle, all picking ahead of the Detroit Lions. Now, looking at the top prospects, there are 3 quarterbacks, 2 edge rushers, and a defensive tackle in the top 5. And if you want to include Will Levis inside the top 6 of this year's draft class. Now, without CJ Stroud, the QB class is much shallower, right? You're looking at this class without CJ Stroud, and it's not necessarily a bad class, right? Bryce Young is still, at that point, definitely the top option. Will Levis is still probably going to go top 5 in that scenario. Anthony Richardson probably gets bumped up a little bit. Maybe Hendon Hooker gets a little bit of a boost just because there's not as many quarterbacks available if CJ Stroud does not test. And 2 quarterbacks are going to be taken at a minimum before the Detroit Lions pick. Right? We don't know exactly how it's going to play out. We don't know if Indianapolis is going to trade up, if the Chicago Bears stay at 1 and they just kind of let the board fall how it is. But we know likely that the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts are going to take quarterbacks at those 2 picks, right? Whether Indianapolis trades to 1 or they stick at 4, right? 2 and 4, Indianapolis and Houston will likely be quarterbacks. There's not many other spaces for them to go at that point. And then you look at, Arizona. Arizona is kind of a wild card. They could go a Will Anderson. They could go a Jalen Carter, or they could go a Peter Skoranek and kind of address, the best offensive lineman in the draft, or if they want to trade down and try to build some other ways, right? They're kind of the one wild card. And then that Chicago's not taking a quarterback, and you're pretty confident that Seattle's not going to take a quarterback either, likely leaving Will Levis at the Detroit Lions with the number 6th overall pick, barring some massive trade-up situation. So with the way the board is playing out with CJ Stroud currently in the mix, that just let's say as a hypothetical, Will Anderson goes first, Bryce Young goes second. Let's say, Peter Skoranek goes third to the Arizona Cardinals, right? They build that foundation, build the offensive lineup, really start to build from the roots, or, maybe they go Jalen Carter. who's to say? But then you, of course, have quarterback at 4 with Indianapolis, and then Seattle is kind of in a position where, yeah, if Jalen Carter's available, you take him. If Myles Murphy's available, you take him, right? They're probably going to take the best defensive talents available at that point in time, leaving the 6th quarterback, or leaving the 3rd quarterback and 6th player with the Detroit Lions. Now, if CJ Stroud isn't in that mix, Will Levis is likely gone at 4, and the Lions have very little bargaining power at that point. But with CJ Stroud entering the draft and Will Levis now likely almost being guaranteed at that 6th spot, or, if CJ falls and they take Levis over him or whatever the case may be, that 3rd quarterback is almost now guaranteed to be at that number 6 spot. And then you can call up Carolina, you could call up Atlanta, or you could call up Las Vegas, all 3 teams that sit 7, 8, 9 respectively, who are all looking for a quarterback, right? Vegas just got rid of Derek Carr. They're going to look to restart, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were aggressive in trading for a quarterback and trading up for a potential franchise quarterback that Josh McDaniels can mold, right? The Atlanta Falcons spent a 3rd-round pick on Desmond Ridder last year, but that doesn't mean that they're out of the quarterback race. Right, they went and they played with Marcus Mariota a majority of the year, and Desmond Ridder really didn't show a whole lot in his first couple starts with the Atlanta Falcons. I would say, okay, that's your guaranteed franchise guy, whereas if you have the ability to go get somebody that is the talent level of Will Levis, right, somebody that has the big arm, somebody that has the extreme upside, there's no guarantee that the Atlanta Falcons don't want to make that deal. And of course, the quarterback situation with Carolina. Are you going to go with Sam Darnold? Are you going to go with PJ Walker? Are you going to go with, Matt Corral, who you drafted in the 3rd round and trade up for last year? Or, and especially with a new head coach and likely, newer general manager, are you going to go get that quarterback, right? If Ben Johnson takes the job, is he going to want to take that ball of clay prospect and mold him into the next Josh Allen? Is the next head coach going to want his guy day one, and he's going to give away assets to move up in the draft for his quarterback? It opens a lot of doors for the Detroit Lions. And of course, if they really love CJ Stroud or they really love Will Levis, that guy's available to them as well, making the pick even more valuable because there's that threat the Lions might take a quarterback at the number 6 overall selection. So even though CJ Stroud might not go to the Detroit Lions, even though he's not really being predicted or projected to go to the Detroit Lions, and neither is any quarterback in this class, the fact that the Lions had the advantage of CJ Stroud adding one more quarterback to the mix, right? Likely pushing that quarterback 3 to the 6th overall selection, and potentially starting a bidding war for that player is going to be huge for the Detroit Lions. And if he doesn't fall, right, if a team trades ahead of the Detroit Lions, let's say a team trades with Seattle, let's say a team trades with Arizona, right, and those guys go off the board, and then the first 3 picks are, let's say, Will Anderson, and then you go Bryce Young to Houston, and then let's say Carolina trades up at 3, and they get CJ Stroud, and then the Colts take Will Levis. That leaves the Seahawks probably taking Jalen Carter, but with positional value, you never know. It could be a guy like Tyree Wilson, or potentially a player we don't know yet, like Myles Murphy, or again, a player we just haven't heard of yet and is going to be a huge riser at the NFL Combine, like Trayvon Walker was last year. So in this position, the Lions are either going to have the ability to trade a quarterback, trade probably Will Levis for that 6th overall selection and get some nice foundational pieces back, get some nice draft assets back, or they're going to be left with the last remaining edge rusher, right, that Tyree Wilson, that Myles Murphy at number 6, or they're going to get lucky and somebody's going to trade up for a quarterback in between 3 to 4, right? They're going to trade up between Houston and Indy, or they're going to trade up with Seattle at 5 and jump Detroit, and they're going to take a quarterback, and the Lions are going to sit right where they are, and they might land the best prospect in this class at number 6 with Jalen Carter. There is a lot of really good things and a lot of really good outcomes for the Detroit Lions at this point, but most of them would not be available with CJ Stroud returning to Ohio State. So even though this might not seem like the craziest news, even though this might not seem like, oh, the Lions are going to get their franchise quarterback at 6, it is going to push other players down. It is going to push Jalen Carter farther down the board. It is going to push maybe a guy like Will Anderson from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 for teams that need a quarterback. It's going to push Will Levis from quarterback 2, probably the 4th overall pick, down to at least the 6th overall pick, in turn making that pick for the Lions significantly more valuable with the last true first-round quarterback on the board for Detroit. So, with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Just kind of a quick video talking about how CJ Stroud really does affect the draft. Because, like it or not, CJ Stroud makes this draft class for the Detroit Lions. Sitting at number 6, sitting outside the top 5, you're really in not a great position to draft one of your top players, right? You're not in a great position necessarily to draft Jalen Carter. You're not in an elite position to get a guy like Will Anderson, and you're probably not going to go quarterback after Jared Goff played like a top 10 player a season ago for the Detroit Lions. But with an extra quarterback in the mix like CJ Stroud, guys get pushed down. Position of value becomes more important. Edge rushers and quarterbacks usually go before defensive tackles. So best case scenario, the Lions get their player and they get the best player in the draft. Worst case scenario, you start a bidding war for that last quarterback on the board who falls at number 6. You can move back, get some assets, and take your top cornerback, take your top defensive end, take your top whatever with the 9th pick instead of the 6th, while potentially accumulating another potential maybe first-round pick or just adding a few more mid-round picks later in the class. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think the Lions drafting strategy should be? How do you think CJ Stroud affects this draft board for the Detroit Lions? I'd be very curious to guys think. With all that being said, though, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.